welcome to another watch list, my weekly run through of what I've been up to, what I've been watching, hopefully in the world of interesting cinema. And this week, again, 5 movies of varying different genres and themes. And we're going to start with one that I've seen recommended by Into the Blue on his video, Top 5 Animated Features. And at the very top is a film that I knew was on Artificial Eye, was kind of in my rental list somewhere. But the fact that it was number 1 in Carl's rundown kind of gave me impetus to go seek it out, and that is ANOMALISA. And ANOMALISA is an animated feature that's very much adult in theme. It tells the story of a man who goes to speak at a conference, or is to be the guest speaker at a conference, and his journey through the hotel and with the people that he encounters both there and in the world around him is interesting to say the least, because this is pretty much a tale of a man who's, well, got poor mental health, but is in fact just feels very lonely. And a lot of the stuff that you see and is represented to you just backs that up. There's a lot of stirring in the scene, a lot of sighing and sloping of shoulders, all in the guise of these, what are 3D printed animated characters. And it's a very interesting style for an animated movie, because they obviously printed these, but what they did to get the animation was have pre-cast or pre-set interchangeable pieces, so like jaw pieces, so they could show that the mouth was moving, and they would replace those in and then kind of record it as they were going along. It must have taken an age to do, but obviously, you know, it was something that paid off very, very effectively right throughout the film, to the very, very end, because it helps convey this sense of hopelessness or loneliness that everybody sees. And actually some of the limitations that they had on the characters actually played very strongly in to the film itself, because this once was a stage play and was adapted for the movie. Now, I got to the end of it and was left a bit dumbstruck, as if, what the hell was that? Because it didn't go the places that I thought it was going to go. It didn't tell the stories that necessarily I thought it was going to tell. And then it flashed up at the end, written by Charlie Kaufman. I know, I didn't know it was a Charlie Kaufman written thing at all, but it helped explain a lot of the WTF-ness of the piece itself, because if you've seen anything by Charlie Kaufman, you know that it's all a bit weird and a bit kind of off-centre, but it's trying to tell you something else in the background. It's trying to communicate a bit more than what you just see. And that helped it a great deal for me, because I was left with this feeling of, God, I really enjoyed that. But again, for an animated feature, normally the themes aren't quite as deep as this one is. And it's definitely one that Carl hit on the money there, because it is something very different and very, very interesting to go and watch. I don't know if I'll go far as to say it's my favourite animated feature of all time, but then if I had discovered it myself, I may have just come to that exact same conclusion. So something to definitely keep your eye out for. And if you've seen any of the images, etc., that I've shown you here, you'll see that the kind of animation has an interesting style to it. And it's actually helped by the extra that's on the Artificial Eye disc, because they do a BFI after show interview with Charlie Kaufman and then the animators, or the people from the animation studio, and it kind of goes into both how it became, how it was made, how it was recorded, etc., and helps explain everything that's going on there. Next up, I have a couple of indicator releases, and they're themed broadly together. I didn't mean to watch the two of them together, but it just so happened that I enjoyed one so much that I watched the other. And the first one that I'll talk about is The VALACHI Papers, starring Charles Bronson. Now, it feels like a story I should have known something about, because it tells the story of, well, Mr. Valachi, John Valachi, who quite famously was the first person who, under investigation, basically confirmed the existence of the mob or the mafia, because he was a person that was a squealer in the end. And he was turned on to testify against the mob and the people that he was there against. And it basically chronicles the story of how he started off as just a driver, and then got into the inner circle of the mafia and how he get in. Now, things that I didn't realise about this film before I watched it or indeed about Charles Bronson, is that he actually found most of his fame working in Europe, specifically Italy, and this was a Dino De Laurentiis picture that was put together, and it's quite long, but it's chronicling some real life events that happened, both his life as a mob man and then ultimately how and why he turned against the mob and testified against them. Really, really interesting. In fact, as a Charles Bronson vehicle, he actually does more speaking than this than I've probably seen him doing pretty much anything else that I've ever seen him do, which is interesting. But yeah, a really interesting release, and of course exemplified by just how wonderful these releases are from Indicator, because the extras in it expound on it further. We get some of the stories into how it related and happened in real life. But in common with both this release and the next one, we have a piece by screenwriter Stephen Geller, who is incredibly honest about his relationship in creating these films, about the people that he met, the people that supported the script, the mob men that he met and that he was terrified of, and ultimately, got help and felt they're very nice men when he met them. It's a really interesting 20-odd minute conversation with him where he just does give a warts and all depiction of his opinion of the film and how it was made. And a real big surprise for me in terms of films that, again, I would never have seen the Valachi Papers if it wasn't for Indicator at all. And I wouldn't have necessarily said Charles Bronson had much of a acting chops about him. He's supported throughout it by, well, his wife's in it, as she was in a lot of his films, and she plays his wife in this as well. And you can see kind of how a lot of the on-screen chemistry is helped by the fact that they were man and wife in it. But another great release by Indicator, and it only spurred me on to watch the other Charles Bronson film that was released around that time, and that was, well, it was released in the same month, and that is The Valdez Horses. And it's another Italian film produced by Dino De Laurentiis, but this one's very different in theme. This one is very clearly much more Western themed, where you're treated to Charles Bronson playing a character called Chino, where Chino works a piece of land that's owned by somebody much richer, raising horses, or breeding horses, or training horses, and pretty much what's accepted to be the best horses in the land. And it's a slow moving piece, there's no doubt about it. It's definitely much a thinking man's piece about his relationship with the land, how he's isolated, and ultimately how he takes a young man into his life as a help and a hand to him, and how his relationship grows with that. It's kind of a bit of a buddy movie in that way, as you have this young man and Chino kind of helping each other navigate life. All in the while, the background, there is the man who owns the land doesn't really want Chino, it turns out he's of mixed race, so he's part Mexican, part Indian, and that all plays into the reasons that people distrust him or don't like him. But he is a bit brusque in character. He's Charles Bronson been picked to act him, so I think that speaks to a lot of it. But yeah, a film that I really, really adored. It is slow moving, it is thoughtful and pensive, but it also is, I think, rewarding at the end of it. You have some beautiful vistas and scenery in it, and, well, it's produced and directed by John Sturges, which in some ways should have been a real boon for it, but as the extras and the booklet attest to, that bit was a disaster. A lot of people were very excited to be working with John Sturges on this, a great American director, especially of Western fame, and as you'll hear in the extras, they were not a bit impressed by how he basically phoned it in, and how it may be that he was replaced at the end of it. So you can check out the extras for that, because again, they're really well worth diving into. And again, Stephen Geller, screenwriter, spills all about a lot of that and otherwise inside it. We have the people that work in the makeup department that talk basically about the relationship between Charles Bronson and, again, Jill Ireland, and how, he was very protective, etc. over a really stacked disc, and again, one that I absolutely adored. Next up is, well, a film that I caught in digital, and it caught my eye, I have to say, because, well, it's about something that's probably relevant to me and relevant to a lot of you, and that's this love for physical media. I mean, you can see behind me exactly where we are with my love for physical media. But that just draws me into the fact that The Impossible Project is a celebration of all things physical media. And it centres on a couple of things, but mainly on the character of Dr. Florian Kaps. And Dr. Florian Kaps is a man who's a bit of an entrepreneur, but he decided that he would try and rescue Polaroid, or the last Polaroid factory that was opened in the Netherlands. And the equipment that was there, he basically bought the factory. Now, Polaroid sold it, got rid of it, and he wanted to bring Polaroids back. And if anybody is of my age, a Polaroid, that kind of instant film camera that there was in the 80s, where you'd self-development or quick development film that came out and you shook it to get your picture, is a very strong nostalgic memory, and it does attest a lot to what happens and why we love physical media and physical things. Holding things and owning things and talking about them as we're holding them is very much a key part of our enjoyment, I think, of not just the film, but the fact that we own and curate and collect these things. It's the things that many people have been talking about in the community for a long while. So initially, when you meet Dr. Florian Kaps, you just think he's a madcap lunatic, to be perfectly honest. He pumped a lot of money into something. He bought this factory with the equipment inside it, but it turned out they either lost or couldn't replicate the formula for the old film that they'd done. The chemicals weren't there anymore. They couldn't reproduce it, so they had to reinvent it again, which seemed like an absolute nightmare. And it was a nightmare for people like that, because it caused a lot of problems, and it's chronicled through the film. And while he is a madcap character, there's no doubt, you can't help but just love him. He's one of those people that creates like this maelstrom effect about them when they talk about something so enthusiastically, and they talk to other people and eschew the virtues of physical things and owning physical things. When he's talking to people, he'll say, well, what do you like? Well, tell me about something that you love. And then he'll say, well, what does it smell like? What's the smell of that physical thing that you like? And there's a couple of people that caught up and helped fund his projects and ideas, because he is just that person. The creator of GeoCities, ironically, is one of them. So that man was kind of around at the very birth of the internet age, or when it really started to take off. And if anybody owned a GeoCity site, and I had a couple of them, ironically enough, doing movie reviews and music reviews, but he has a great love for physical media and for physical things, and a lot of the projects that he was doing on the outside, and the people that he appreciated, and the people that were along the way, and the troubles that he had over the space of time, because it isn't all just smooth sailing. Coupled with this is just one of the most exquisite and gorgeous soundtracks you'll ever see in a production. It's so nice, in fact, that I think they're producing the vinyl as its own separate release. So some of it is recorded music from beforehand, but they also recorded a lot of stuff with a band, etc. in the background, and that is just wonderful to listen to, and really gives a lovely feel, and it just prompts the whole film to basically have this feeling of joy about it, because I smiled my whole way through it. It was a film that was kickstarted, it was shot in film, and it was kickstarted and funded and then released. If you can catch it anywhere, it'll hopefully appear in streaming services that will give everybody a chance soon to watch it. But if not, if you love physical media and have any love for that world, certainly you should check it out. Something to really grab a hold of. Wonderful. And last this week, we have, well, a film by, I'm going to butcher this, George SLUIZER, whatever that one is. I don't know either. His film, The Vanishing. The Dutch film about the disappearance of a young woman from outside a petrol station, or a filling station, or a service station. And this is a film that I'd heard, obviously, a lot about. A lot of people talk about The Vanishing as being one of the great films to watch from European cinema, especially over the past kind of 30 years or so. And it certainly is. Mainly because it eschews many of the tropes that we have of that kind of film, which are, you know, very much centering on the abduction and centering on the recovery of her. But The Vanishing does something a bit different, and that is it centers as much on the captor as on the captee and the people that are affected by that, which is mainly, you know, her boyfriend, who never gives up the chase for trying to find her, etc. Now, it's a bit of a disturbing film because of that, because it shows both sides very clearly. That maybe everything just wasn't about him being a monster, or the fact that, you know, he maybe, there were things that happened to him, and there's flaws in his character, all of those things that led him to do what he did. Really interesting release to watch and pick up. It was, like I say, it was quite uncomfortable at many stages to go through, but definitely worth watching because it does go against a lot of the tropes of the genre. For instance, it does this kind of willy won't stage at we just see her disappear at the start, really. We don't see what happened, and it is revealed over the course of the film. But there's always this kind of thing, well, it must have happened here. Oh, did it not? No, it didn't. And it kind of pushes and pulls and toys with your emotions and basically the pacing of the film, because you expect that when that bit's revealed, we're going to get a bit more about it. And, you know, just a terrific release to watch. So that was my week. That was my go through what I've seen the past kind of week. I've had a couple of suggestions the past couple of weeks of films to move up. A Light Sleeper's been suggested to me from Indicator. I'm going to stick that on my list. I've got a couple of other things that I'm looking forward to watching myself over the next kind of week or so. I've got a couple of Criterion releases. I've got The Ascent to watch up there, and I have Geronimo and a couple of others. I have Romeo Was Bleeding from BFI as well. So they're coming up in the next kind of episode of the next week or so, and I'm very much looking forward to catching up on those. So thank you very much for watching. Again, let me know what you've been up